I am tired of words, and I am tired of my words. Breathing hypocrite. Mirroring the title, there shall be a lot of words here. I intend on making this an insufferable poem. Isolation this and isolation that. Do not give my suffering reason. Tired of hearing advice from those who I know are the most broken. Those who are being broken by the same hammer that they try to use to build a house for another. I think it is admirable, beautiful, and hypocritical. Those who know that they are struggling and that if they received the words they gave, they would not be happy, tired of this tennis match of life. This is not necessarily my life speaking. This is a room full of thoughts with nowhere to sit. This is what happens after too many explanations, after too many holy captions under videos of suffering, after too many people mistaking endurance for enlightenment. This poem is entertaining perspectives. It is letting them fight in the open. It is letting them bleed a little. It is tired, just tired. They say maybe the impossible thing is an answered prayer. Maybe the fire was mercy, maybe the wound was a curriculum, maybe the abandonment was divine redirection, maybe the loneliness was God clearing the room, maybe the silence was preparation, maybe the breaking was becoming. Maybe this terrible thing had to happen so that something beautiful could crawl out of it wearing your face. Maybe. Maybe every bruise is a staircase. Maybe grief is a mentor. Maybe devastation is just destiny with better public relations. Maybe you had to be crushed to become the person you were meant to be. And maybe that is exactly the kind of sentence people invent when they cannot bear the possibility. That pain is pain, that loss is loss, that some things do not descend from heaven with a lesson plan, but simply tear through the body and leave. Like the idea of justice being a conception from those who have contrived it so that they could be absolved of their own sin. I am sick of explanations dressed up as tenderness, sick of every catastrophe being called a bridge, sick of hearing that the pit is purposeful while I am still at the bottom of it with dirt in my teeth. Everything happens for a reason, they say. What a beautiful sentence when everything has happened to you and you know damn well that sentence did not do anything. What an elegant little chandelier of a sentence to hang over wreckage. Everything happens for a reason. Tell that to the child learning too early how to become quiet in a dangerous house. Tell that to the lover who keeps rereading the last message like scripture might appear if they stare long enough. Tell that to the friend who gave their softness away in buckets and came home each night to an empty well. Tell that to the body that flinches before it is touched. Tell that to the mother who buried what she was never supposed to bury. Everything happens for a reason, no. Sometimes a thing happens and it is obscene. Sometimes a thing happens and the only honest language for it is that it should not have happened. But people are terrified of an unassigned universe. They need the wound to mean something, need the ash to point somewhere, need the horror to be a receipt for a reward they have not yet received. Because if suffering has no reason, then we are not pilgrims, we are just breakable. And that terrifies them. So they call your anguish an answered prayer. They call your confusion a season. They call your starvation a fast. They call your loneliness refinement. They call your devastation proof that God is doing his deepest work. Deepest work. For an omnipotent being, he is astonishingly comfortable with implication, a master of never arriving directly, a genius of smoke, symbol, delay, a whole cosmos hanging on, just trust me, a whole theology built out of interpret my silence correctly. He never says a single word, but somehow we are always the ones failing the conversation. He never speaks plainly, but we are handed the blame for not hearing him through car crashes, through funerals, through unanswered calls, through beds gone cold, through the long cathedral of being abandoned. And still they say, defend him, translate his absence, polish his silence until it shines like wisdom. Maybe this happened because you prayed for growth. Did I? Did I ask for this specifically, or did I ask to be loved without having to become unrecognizable first? Did I ask for depth, or did I ask for rest? Did I ask to evolve, or did I ask once, very quietly, for somebody not to leave? Why is every prayer interpreted like a contract with disaster? Why does asking for light always seem to come with somebody explaining why the house had to burn down first? And then the self love people arrive, right? Love yourself first. Be whole on your own. Heal before you ask to be held. Do not seek in others what you have not cultivated within yourself. Build your own cup. Fill your own cup. Become the well. Become the source. Become enough, 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 enough. I'm tired of enough. Tired of enough. Tired of being told that intimacy is a prize distributed only to those who have mastered emotional solitary confinement. Tired of this religion of self sufficiency marketed as wisdom, as if the highest form of human evolution is needing no one, as if dependency is a defect instead of one of the oldest languages we have, as if the infant reaching outward is some kind of moral failure, as if being moved by love, needing reassurance, aching for tenderness, wanting to collapse into the arms of another person and be told, stay, 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 is evidence of poor spiritual hygiene? No. I do not think we came here to become islands with good coping skills. I think we came here breakable. I think we came here reaching. I think we came here with our little frightened hands already programmed to search for warmth. And maybe the tragedy is not that we need each other. Maybe the tragedy is how often we are taught to perform as though we do not. Self-sufficiency is theater. A very convincing theater, yes. A beautifully lit theater, a standing ovation theater, but still theater. A person says, I do not need anyone with their voice trembling only slightly. A person says, I am fine while their soul is pacing behind the curtain. A person says, I can hold myself together because they have learned how humiliating it is to fall apart in front of doubters. And what a strange punishment it is to become so good at carrying your own weight that nobody believes you deserve help. What a curse to survive so elegantly that people mistake your performance for peace. What a lonely thing to finally set down the armor only to watch confusion enter the room. You needing, you breaking, you wanting to be chosen, reassured, kept, as though vulnerability does not fit the brand they built out of your pain, as though the strong are not simply the ones who have had the least permission to be seen collapsing. I am interested in that moment, that exact moment. I am interested. When the mask of self-sufficiency slips and everybody stares like they have caught the ocean asking for water. Because we do not just fear vulnerability, we fear what it exposes. That beneath all of our philosophies, all of our curated independence, all of our sharpened language about boundaries and growth and alignment, there remains something humiliatingly ancient inside us, begging to be met. Not fixed, not diagnosed into submission, not turned into a sermon, met. And maybe that is what these platitudes protect us from, not despair, recognition. Because if I admit that some suffering is meaningless, then I also have to admit that comfort might be my responsibility. That I cannot outsource tenderness to fate, that I cannot explain somebody back into my life, that I cannot decorate their misery with the language of purpose and call myself wise. Maybe purpose is not hidden in pain. Maybe purpose is what we invent together, so pain does not have the final word. Maybe purpose is not an explanation. Maybe it is an act. Maybe purpose is feeding someone, calling someone back, believing them when they say this hurts, refusing to make a metaphor out of their devastation, remaining. Maybe the holiest thing is not interpretation. Maybe it is witness. And maybe none of this is real. Maybe there is no great ledger, no invisible symmetry, no equal measure, no cosmic exchange rate where every loss is reimbursed in glory. Maybe you do not lose one thing to gain another. Maybe some people are just robbed. Maybe some prayers hit the ceiling and fall back down as dust. Maybe there is no hand arranging grief into a shape your future self will thank. Maybe there is no reason. And if there is no reason, then what? Then what do we do with all these burnt offerings of language, all these glittering phrases we toss like pennies into the mouths of the grieving? Then what is suffering? Then what is love? Then what is feeling better if nothing changes? Feeling, I do not even want to get started on that. Then what is the point of opening your chest in a world so skilled at calling your hunger a lesson? I do not know. I do not know. Maybe this is the honest thing. Not every fire is a forge, not every delay is divine, not every ache is an assignment, not every silence is sacred, not every lonely night is preparing you for a greater love. Some nights are just lonely, some losses stay losses, some people do not come back, most people don't come back. Some faith in the mouth, some prayers are never answered. Some versions of you do not break through, they simply break. And still, something in us reaches. Not because a quote told us to, not because suffering is beautiful, not because God finally made himself clear, not because the universe owes us coherence. Something in us reaches because we are not built for sealed rooms, because despite all the performances, all the speeches, all the armor polished to a mirror shine, we remain creatures of ache and attachment. We remain animals with memory, children with adult faces, mouths still shaped by the first time comfort saved us. I do not want another slogan. I do not want another radiant explanation stitched over a fresh wound. I want the truth even if it enters barefoot, even if it has bad posture, even if it cannot save me. The truth that sometimes life is unbearable and no grand design steps forward to justify it. The truth that need is not failure. The truth that self love can become a locked room if it is forced to do the work that only mutuality can do. The truth that vulnerability is not weakness but memory. The truth that there might be no truth, body memory, species memory, soul memory if you believe in one. The truth that we do not merely want to be admired for our strengths, we want to be held in our strange, unsightly places. We want someone to see the flaw, touch it gently, and stay, not in spite of it, because that too is you. Because love that cannot bear your fracture was never meant to survive your whole humanity. So no, do not tell me the impossible thing is beautiful yet. Do not rush to make a cathedral out of what is still collapsing. Do not hand me a reason when what I have asked for is room. Let the room be ugly, let the thought be blasphemous, let the faith fail its own audition. Let the poem say, I am tired of translating pain into palatable wisdom. Let it say, I do not know whether anything happens for a reason. Let it say, I do not know whether God is there. Let it say, I am still human enough to want tenderness more than theories. Let it say, I do not want to become untouchable in order to survive. Let it say, I would rather be wounded and real than worshipped for being numb. Let it say, I am tired, just tired, and let that be enough tonight. Let it be known again that this is not a confession, not testimony, not a diary entry ripped open under fluorescent light. This is a thought experiment, a tired experiment. This is what happens when the mind watches suffering scroll past in high definition and the spirit refuses to keep pretending it understands the rules. This is what happens when every explanation starts to sound like a commercial. They say the impossible situation is an answered prayer. They say you had to go through the fire so that you could become who you are. They say everything happens for a reason. They say purpose is a destination already printed on your boarding pass. You just have to survive the turbulence. They say the people who help others are secretly empty themselves. They say this version of you is breaking through. They say be grateful for how horrible things are. They say God is working, God is working, God is always working. And somehow the only one who never clocks in is relief. I'm fascinated by the performance of self-sufficiency, how we stand upright like monuments to independence while quietly starving for the simple miracle of being held without explanation. We were not born self-sufficient, we were born wet with need, crying like alarms that could not be snoozed. We clung to warmth without first proving we deserved it. We did not write essays on loving ourselves before reaching out for the trembling hand that kept us alive. We just reached. God, we just reached. But now we must earn intimacy through philosophical fitness. Now we must demonstrate emotional solvency before we are granted tenderness. Now we must become entire universes before anyone is allowed to orbit us. And they call this growth, they call this healing, they call this self-love. Sometimes it feels like solitary confinement with a motivational speaker pounding on the glass. There is a paradox that tastes like metal in the mouth. I perform self-sufficiency to avoid vulnerability, yet self-sufficiency is the loneliest vulnerability I have ever known. It is a stage play with no audience where the actor forgets what applause sounds like. It is building a fortress and realizing you are also the prisoner. And then the platitudes arrive like pigeons that will not stop landing. Everything happens for a reason. God has a plan. This pain is preparations. Heartbreak is instruction. This confusion is divine choreography. They speak with such confidence about the intentions of an infinite being who has never once submitted a statement for public record. Not a whisper, not a memo, not a trembling note slid under the door saying, I am sorry this hurts, but trust me. Just variants. Nothing. Just interpreters, endless interpreters of silence. What if nothing happens for a reason? What if purpose is something we invented because randomness felt like suffocation? What if God exists, but is indifferent, or absent, or tired too? Or what if there is no God at all, just the echo of our own voices trying to comfort themselves inside a cathedral we built out of fear? What did we give up to be born? Nobody asks that question. They only ask what we must sacrifice to become. But existence itself feels like a transaction we do not remember agreeing to. Did we trade peace for consciousness? Did we trade freedom for the ability to name colors? Did we trade eternity for a lifetime of trying to understand why? We are here. I am tired of the development arcs that require devastation, tired of wisdom that only arrives after something beautiful has been buried, tired of narratives that demand we frame survival as destiny, tired of gratitude being prescribed like medication for wounds that are still open. Maybe vulnerability is not a breakthrough. Maybe it is simply a language. Maybe it is simply our original language returning after years of forced translation. Maybe intimacy was never meant to be negotiated like a ceasefire. Maybe we were never all maybe we were always meant to be unfinished together. And maybe, just maybe, this exhaustion is not a lesson, not a test, not a divine puzzle waiting for the correct emotional password. Maybe it is just exhaustion, raw, unexplained, unredeemed. A human being standing in the middle of existence after watching one more video, one more tragedy, one more smiling philosopher explaining why suffering is secretly a gift, and finally saying, no, I do not feel gifted. I feel tired. Just tired. Screw all of these words and my words. Everything feels like a test, and I am tired of trying to figure out which one is this, and which one is that, and which one will lead to this, and so on and so forth. This is going to be it for a bit. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me this platform.